Hold on, wait a minute, I just noticed something. Look at her fucking hips. She's absolutely snatched. What the fuck? Great googly moogly. Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more Lewittin, and this time with a video I probably should have watched sooner on his channel. Or at the very least, probably should have watched this around the same time that I watched Bricky's Warhammer explained video. But I'm going to try and remember Bricky's video and kind of compare Lewittin's here versus Bricky's. I thought Bricky's was pretty good at explaining for a noob. Lewittin typically tends to be a bit, it feels like to me, as a newbie to this franchise, a bit more for the higher nerds. But this is What the Fuck is Warhammer 40k Explained, full beginner's guide, plus every major faction lore/history by Lewittin. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love to join the Discord and follow me over at Twitch, and please do go check out the gaming channel here on YouTube. Remember, I will be reacting to Hell's Reach sometime on my Twitch channel after we hit 500 followers over there. So make sure you go and follow me over at Twitch, so you can witness that live, because that's going to be a long-ass video to watch, right? It's probably going to be over 3 hours, so I want to do that. I want to live stream that, not just record that by my lonesome in my room. So please go follow me. Yapping done. Let's go ahead and dive in. Well, yapping done for now. There will be more yap to come. In the grim darkness of the far future. My dogs are barking. The Emperor of Man, the Carrion Lord, for whom 1,000 souls die every day. Human blood, human flesh, the stuff of which the Imperium is made. Forget the promise of God damn it, dogs. Like, they bark once and then they stop, but then, like, the moment I'm going to start talking again, they're going to start barking again. Forget the promise of progress and understanding, for there is no peace among the stars. The universe is a big place, and whatever happens, you will not be missed. Adeptus Illuminati. 4967461.m41. Well, technically speaking, war does lead to a lot of technical progress. Of course, it's the kind of technical progress that makes us better at killing each other, but also we got GPS because of war. Now, I probably didn't need to pause the video to read this. Seems like it's giving you plenty of time to read it. Oopsies. Warhammer 40k Primer.
Welcome to the first in my series of primers focused on the universe of Warhammer 40,000. If you're watching this, you may well be brand new to the all-encompassing hobby we call 40k.
I'm kind of not watching Warhammer 40k videos in the best of orders, am I, y'all?
But what is it? What's it all about, and why should you consider looking into it?
I blame you guys,
further?
I don't blame
For
myself.
one reason, in recent times, people's appetites have been reawakened to highly immersive TV series like Game of Thrones, or movie franchises with a decent backstory. 40k goes considerably far beyond these examples. It is one of the biggest miniature wargames in the world, and features an ever-evolving story that expands in written text, video games, and of course its original and arguably most important feature, the miniatures and its tabletop game. It is created and owned by Games Workshop, a UK-based company producing tabletop games and associated materials. Now, I will cover elements of 40k as briefly as I can today, but I won't skimp on detail just for the sake of time. It's as to the point as I can make it, but if you want to know more about specifics, here on my channel I've covered in detail some of the core background areas of the game, which is continuing to expand. I'll also be continuing to produce these short primers to the world of 40k, and I'll also be continuing to make the longer form content which is featured regularly here on the channel. Often referred to by those already consumed by Warhammer 40,000 as the hobby, 40k is not one thing to one person. It is a highly detailed narrative spanning multiple empires, from world-ending galactic campaigns to lowly individual soldier stories. It is a series of usually middle-of-the-road video games with a few standout gems. It's a hobby of addictive miniature painting and crafting, and it is a tabletop wargame now established for over 30.
I haven't really seen any of the games actually be standout in terms of, and when I say that, when I say these kind of statements, that means to the wider population. I think Warhammer Vermintide is, I think, really the Warhammer video games by Creative Assembly, the Total War Warhammer. Those are really the only things in Warhammer that I feel like have stretched out into the wider population. And those are both not Warhammer 40k. Oh, yeah, I feel like none of the Warhammer, maybe in the early mid 2000s, there was a Warhammer 40k game that might have gotten very popular, but like at least off the top of my head that I can remember in the last like 10 years, I feel like we haven't really gotten a 40k game that's like on big. There was one that released I think a few months ago as of recording this. I cannot remember the name. That did okay, but it didn't really I think people that played it liked it, but it didn't really gain much popularity. I think it was one of those turn-based strategy games, kind of similar to XCOM, I think was what its design was. And then, as of recording this, there's supposed to be a new Warhammer 40k game coming out later this year that looks good, but we'll see if that actually gets reaches truly outside of the fan base, right? So yeah, personally, I don't think we maybe to the player base here, to the fan base here, they've had gems, but to the wider, consumer base of gamers, I don't think we've really had anything out of 40k that's been all that popular. Unless I'm just completely blanking on a 40k game that really was mega uber popular.
Years. It has spawned a variety of smaller games designed to be played without acquiring a huge army, games like Space Hulk, Necromunda, and Kill Team, and these often require only say 6 to 10 pieces per side and are very accessible for new players, whereas standard Warhammer 40,000 tabletop may require larger armies with many pieces. Now, before we come to the lore, it is worth looking at the original tabletop game, as this will give you a better understanding of just everything about it.
I like that he's doing that. This is something that Bricky didn't do. He didn't really talk about the game itself. He just was talking about like beginner entry level sort of lore in his video. So I do like that he is talking, and Bricky did talk about the hobby a little bit, but not really to kind of, I don't think Bricky really talked about the hobby itself in terms of a beginner accessibility. He kind of, in that regard, still kind of dived off the deep end there and was like armies. So I like that Lewitton here is talking about the more accessible parts of it, right? Because obviously it is in Games Workshop's best interest to have a part of their game. Obviously, you want to wean people into this kind of thing because, right, miniatures are expensive. They are pieces of art, little miniature pieces of art. They are things that are kind of pricey to make, I feel like. I don't know, obviously, the production cost of such things, but and obviously they've probably gotten cheaper in recent years with the accessibility of 3D printing, but still fairly expensive kind of hobby to get into, because then you also got to pay for the paints and stuff like that, but yada yada yada. I like that he's mentioning a version of the game, of the tabletop game, that is accessible to more regular people that maybe don't want to dive in and have full-blown fucking massive armies.
If you've never seen or encountered a tabletop game, this is not important, it's actually very simple. Usually 2 players will engage in a battle laid out on a table at your home or a gaming venue. The area of play will be set with terrain pieces, often crafted and painted by the players, and they will alternate turns moving their miniature soldiers or vehicles and will resolve engagements through random dice rolls according to specific rules and combinations of preset unit stats. There may or may not be a mission for one side to achieve, and these games can be highly strict or open to player interpretations. Players will usually paint their miniature soldiers for use on the battlefield, and these can be in a variety of factional designs and colours. Some people prefer.
So obviously we see the amount that are here on the map. What I'm curious about, are you only able to move a certain amount of your troops, of your minis around the map per turn? Because I feel like if you're allowed to just move all of the individual minis per turn, that feels a bit excessive, right? I think I'm going to go with the assumption, unless we get told here and how the game plays, that you'll have to choose a certain amount per turn to move. That's my guess.
Prefer their involvement in 40k to be focused entirely on this hobby of painting, designing, and modifying.
Y'all, there was this, I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't the Warhammer Fantasy, but it was something similar. It was something my dad and I played together. You would get these like hexagonal pieces, and you could build various maps. I don't remember what it was called, but we had it was similar to Warhammer, just not as big in scope. And it was fantasy. I loved it so much. The minis came pre-painted, but oh man, I enjoyed that game a lot. I'm sure I still have the map pieces, but man, I don't remember what the game was called. I'm sure one of you is gonna leave a comment telling me what the game was called, and it's just gonna click in my head and be like, yes, that's what it was called. But I can't remember what it was called right now. Well, that's my board game experience.
These miniature units, and this part of 40k can be just as all-consuming as the lore or the tabletop.
This dude's head seems a bit disproportionate to his body.
Some may choose to split their time between each part or devote all their hobby time to one piece of the whole 40k hobby, be that the lore, tabletop, or the painting designing element.
Okay, he's not gonna.
Now comes the challenge for me, summarizing 40k. So Warhammer 40,000 is set in the distant future, a future beset by galactic war, from a skirmishing city turf war level through to planetary conquest and system-wide campaigns fought through its space and planets. It is far more pessimistic than most other deep lore universes, and
a bit. It's more pessimistic and cynical than Dune. Well, who is it? I think it depends on how we want to look at it. Dune is very much is meant to be a critique on political leaders, on leaders in general. Warhammer hasn't really given me the vibe of being a critique on leadership. Just more so wider. Like, I don't know. I haven't really gotten too good of a vibe as to what maybe some of the themes of Warhammer are meant to be, the messages and such in Warhammer through these lore videos. They haven't really given me too good of a solid vibe. Everyone leaves comments talking about, yes, the setting is very dark, but there are some people. This is the voice I give you commenters in my head. But then there are still good people on the people, good individuals in the darkness, and it's like, yeah, okay. But like, I don't know. To me, it's kind of like, are the good people? It doesn't feel like the good people are affecting any sort of meaningful change, and for me, that's where I draw the like, it's not for me kind of line. I still want the good people to have some sort of solid impact on the world, and obviously based on how Games Workshop probably wants to monetize this thing for time immemorial, good people are not going to make any sort of meaningful impact on society and bringing war to an end, right? This is me as looking at it from a narrative perspective and not from a gameplay perspective, right? Because obviously, if you're playing it as a game, yeah, I kind of want the war to keep going because that's how you keep playing the game, right? Whereas then from a narrative perspective, enjoying a story, you want, right, the war to come to a conclusion, that sort of thing, right? So it's a duality of man, a conflict of interest, of enjoyment.
And also regularly borders on what you would describe as space horror. Now 40k is primarily focused around humanity, which has through many thousands of years achieved an unimaginable level of technology, and then lost the majority of this zenith through a devastating war. Humanity after this ancient war was left broken and fragmented across the galaxy. It would be later reunified by one godlike individual known as the Emperor of Man, and he would set in motion the new order for mankind known as the Imperium of Man. But a devastating civil war known as the Horus Heresy would befall mankind.
Again, I gotta watch a video just on the Horus Heresy because, I don't think I've watched a single video that's just solely about the Horus Heresy. Unless I'm forgetting shit, which is entirely possible, but I don't think... No, I've had to have watched something on the Horus... I know I watched one on the Chaos Marine. And that talked a little bit about the Horus Heresy, but I don't think we've gotten a full deep dive into it yet.
For the Emperor to complete his goals for humanity, and he would instead now become a living corpse enshrined on Earth or Terra. Humanity would become shattered by this civil war, and after a slow, painful recovery, it has become for the longest time a stagnant civilization. Suffocating under its own bureaucracy, the Imperium has begun making the smallest steps toward advancement in the most recent days of its history, but it still stands as a strange juxtaposition of ancient tech that is beyond the comprehension of many of its citizens. It is a weak and precarious civilization, simultaneously able to wield immense military power. Humanity itself, through thousands of years of conflict with alien races who are more often than not excessively hostile, has become a highly xenophobic race. It views almost all other races as needing to be exterminated and has almost no morals or ethics as to how this is to be achieved. The galaxy-spanning empire of humanity is essentially a totalitarian state that worships the Emperor of Man. The Imperium of Man has large, if not complete, control over its citizens, including many aspects of their lives, economy, social life, education, private lives, science, and indoctrination into its ideology. Any who are not seen to be a follower of the Emperor may and will be persecuted as heretics, and this is often largely open to interpretation and leads to large-scale abuses of power and executions. The Imperium uses this deeply entrenched worship and imperial ideology to control and mobilize mass populations of its citizenry for its armies like the Imperial Guard and Imperial Fleet. It also will utilize its citizens to fulfill whatever role is needed. These roles can, and often are, fairly unpleasant, especially when the rule of law is often severe and absolute. Humanity also wields in its arsenal the Emperor's greatest gift, the military sledgehammer known as the Imperial Astartes. These are the iconic Space Marines, genetically enhanced superhuman warriors who represent the pinnacle of human modification and military power. Their forces have access to some of the most powerful weapons and force multipliers humanity wields. Much of this tech is ancient and requires careful care and repair by specialists dedicated to retaining this critical knowledge. But as powerful as humanity is, even with its small progression in its most recent times, it still stands on the edge of annihilation by various alien races or entities. Humanity somehow has survived to this point despite being on an almost permanent risk of complete destruction and forced extinction. Within the lore, this has nearly happened on multiple occasions, and what is left of humanity now in the Imperium of Man are the remnants of those survivors, a highly ignorant, fearful people in a fairly constant state of decay where critical technological information is often lost. The Imperium and humanity's primary goals are to locate lost technology from the zenith period of mankind, known as the Dark Age of Technology, otherwise referred to as the Golden Age. It also focuses upon the continued defense and expansion of its territories, and of course the extermination of all alien races, known collectively as the Xenos. Because humanity has become so violently and ignorantly xenophobic in the far future, it also has no qualms.
I mean, you're telling me we aren't already? To each other?
About committing planetary levels of genocide. If you're not human and don't worship the Emperor, then you are the enemy, a heretic, and must be exterminated. Diplomacy is almost not a thing for the Imperium, and the usual recourse is to just shoot on sight. In fairness though, there was a time where humanity had attempted a more diplomatic approach, but this over time has just disintegrated, with most of its contact with aliens resulting in some kind of conflict. It now simply believes all other life must be extinguished, or at the very least dominated and enslaved for work or experimentation. These cases are usually quite rare. There are 6 other races that are seen as the enemies of humanity. Any of these factions can be played by you within the tabletop game of 40k, or models for collecting and painting. Some players will dedicate themselves entirely to one faction, building it up, fleshing it out to the limit of their model making ability, and others may have multiple armies of different factions. The Necrons are a very ancient race, strange creatures that appear like metallic skeletons. They're actually formed of living metal. They span the galaxy and are in a continuing state of awakening from their tombs after many thousands of years of sleep. They seek to rebuild their empire and dominate the galaxy. One of their key abilities is that of reanimation. They can reassemble themselves after death and fight on. They're also generally mindless automatons. How this came to be is another story. Now, Games Workshop has seen fit to recently rename some of its units, largely it seems for legal reasons, but since forever this faction has been known as the Eldar. More recently it is known as the Eldari.
Well, what are the legal reasons for the Eldari then? If they've been trying to... They don't have... That's not... I mean, it is very Lord of the Rings sounding, Eldari. But... I mean, the closest it is to me, off the top of my head, what I'm remembering from Lord of the Rings lore is the Ishtari, which are the wizards. But, I don't know, it's still not close enough, I feel like, for legal reasons to have to change it. Am I forgetting one? I don't think that goes over any sort of... Well, maybe because they're both Lord of the Rings... Tolkien Estate is UK based and Games Workshop is UK based. Maybe there's something in UK legal stuff that screws them over, that makes it because it's too Tolkien-esque sounding, that's what screws them over. I don't know, but I'm not. And obviously there could be some other fucking copyrighted work that's popular in the UK that I am not aware of that has a much more similar name that came out before Games Workshop came out with the Eldar and stuff. But yeah, just off the top of my head, I'm not seeing a...
Sorry, but basically it's the Eldar. These are derived from the elves of many more fantasy games and are basically space elves. Despite this quite simplistic analogy, the Eldar have a rich and tragic lore because of past disasters that have left the Eldar...
Hold on, wait a minute, I just noticed something. Look at her fucking hips. She's absolutely snatched. What the fuck? Great googly moogly.
Masters that have left the Eldar with no homeworlds to speak of, they now travel the galaxy in vast ships known as craft worlds. The Eldar wield powerful weapons, but are generally physically weak, and they also have immense arrogance towards other races. Their defining feature, and to some degree their biggest flaw, is that the Eldar are very powerful when it comes to psychers and psychic abilities drawn from the warp. The Dark Eldar are essentially space pirates who live lives of excess and sadistic torture porn. Anyone who looks like they're about to be captured by the Dark Eldar is rarely something that you would want to contemplate, and suicide would generally be significantly preferable. A faction of many faces and contradicting goals, Chaos is as its name describes, and it originates from the parallel dimension known as the Warp. And this dimension is a reactive plane of existence that absorbs the most powerful emotions and desires of mortal creatures. The reactive Imperium would lead to the birth of entities of godlike power, the Chaos Gods. They each focus on specific mortal desires. Khorne is the god of blood, representing war, rage, and hatred. Tzeentch is the changer representing ambition, scheming, conspiracy, and sorcery. Nurgle is the plague god representing mortality, morbidity, and despair. And Slaanesh is the god of lust, greed, excess, pleasure, pain, and perfection. The continuing desires and emotions of the galaxy's inhabitants sustain these entities. However, they also reach out into the mortal realm through their manifested entities made from the warp known as demons. And these hellish creatures are enough to send ordinary citizens insane on sight. They're backed by traitors to the Imperium, the corrupted Chaos Space Marines. The gods of chaos and their agents can also infect the minds of mortals, and often cults and worshippers may spring up on planets across the Imperium. This is again one reason why the Imperium of Man is so ruthless about purging heretics. While chaos itself in the material world appears as one enemy that simply wages war, it is in fact in an internal conflict within itself. Each of the Chaos Gods fights for domination over the others, and this occupies the majority of their focus and energy. Each god's ultimate goal is complete domination of the Imperium, a goal which seems unattainable and dangerous to their own existence were it to come to pass. Chaos is one of the most varied and pervasive forces in 40k and has many forces operating under its banner, some dedicated to a specific god, others that simply worship chaos undivided.
Wag! The Orcs! We gonna stomp the universe! Wag! Sorry.
Now everybody knows the Orcs, right? Middle-earth and all that crap. Not these Orcs. These are more Mad Max Fury Road crossed with British football hooligans, and then you're in the right ballpark. Also in space. Space Orcs are likely a genetically designed species focused for hyper-violence and to be almost impossible to permanently exterminate. They are as hilarious as they are dangerous, and their entire society focuses around casual violence. The Orcs, though, are also probably the most sunny and optimistic of all races, strangely. Their genetic disposition sets them to see things as generally good and enjoyable, especially when it comes to fighting. And they never really see failure as a negative, because it means you just get to have another go later. They also operate more on instinct by design than learned knowledge, and their willpower becomes more powerful the more Orcs are present, meaning when they are collected en masse, they can literally will things to be true by collective belief. They also have a strange ability to just cobble together vehicles and weapons from scrap. They also have no real governing structure. Leaders are chosen by progressively being better at smashing their rivals' heads in, until an Orc eventually reaches the position of being a war boss. When Orcs collect in huge numbers, they may launch a massive campaign of raiding and attacking anything that's not Orc by launching a warg, essentially a huge, no-holds-barred slaughter fest. Anything in the way, best dig in or get the hell out. The Tau are one of the newer races and are fast learning that the galaxy is not a friendly place. The Tau operate similarly to the Orcs on a more optimistic level, but that's about as far as their common ground with the Orcs goes, because the Tau exist on the fringe of the Imperium and are unusual as they actively encourage other races to join their cause. They collectively follow an ideology known as the greater good. This is their guiding principle that working together is better than working against one another, as this leads to a stronger, more peaceful society. However, anybody who disagrees with this best prepare for war. To be fair though, the Tau do usually attempt significant levels of diplomacy before declaring their target a lost cause.
Yeah, as I said when we first met the Tau in my series of reactions to Warhammer 40k here, and even here in this video, this introduction, you can just tell the Tau just kind of feel off to the setting of Warhammer 40k because it's just so obsessively violent and dark. That then just having the Tau, the one faction kind of, I don't know, doing that, it just feels kind of off to me. Maybe it comes across differently in play and in, in the novels and stuff like that, but getting it through this kind of lore, bits of lore that we've been doing, they just kind of do feel a little off.
Their military is largely focused around technology and ranged combat, something often mocked and derided by their enemies. The Tau themselves are comparatively weak and use other races absorbed into their faction to fight in close quarters. Tyranids are an unusual exception to all previous Xenos. They do not operate on an ideology, a political structure, or debatably a single leader. They are the most Xenos of Xenos and have begun a steady invasion of the galaxy. They are presumed to have arrived from beyond the borders of the known galaxy and are hostile in the extreme. They do not wield any technology as we would understand it, or their ships, forces and weapons are biological in origin. Tyranids are one of the most nightmarish factions within 40k. Their singular goal is biomass, that is to strip planets of all biological and mineral materials, leaving them barren, dead husks. They assault planets with extreme prejudice and will not cease their assault unless they are damaged to a point where their acquisition of biomass becomes negative to that being expended. They use all material to birth their forces on their vast bioships and recycle their own units by dissolving them back into the pool of biomass, which then they draw to create anything else they may need. They absorb the genetics of all that they encounter and use this to evolve and create more hostile and efficient creatures and biomachines to achieve their goal. They may also seed and infect planets ahead of time to often use the planet's own inhabitants against themselves when the Tyranids arrive to destroy the world.
Lovely.
The Tyranids are controlled en masse by something called the hive mind. This is essentially a broadcasted collective consciousness that enables them the powerful skill of being able to operate as one, but made up of millions of individual entities across a planet. The Tyranids are horrific, seemingly unstoppable, and have already wrought terrible destruction upon many others across the galaxy. Many rumour that their already devastating campaigns are only the initial scouting parties to the Milky Way galaxy, and if this is true, the Tyranids could be the ones to end everything. While not wanting to touch on the subject of psychic power too strongly in this video, many factions in 40k feature what are known as psychers. These are essentially individuals who can wield what you might describe in other universes as magic powers. Some factions have strong psychers and others have none, and these powers are drawn from the parallel dimension known as the warp or the Imperium. Individuals who can use these powers do so at considerable risk, as the warp is an unstable and dangerous realm. The relationship between real space and warp space is a complicated one and can affect many aspects of life in the far future, but this is something best covered in another video. The takeaway for you today is that Warhammer 40,000 is a world of vast-scale warfare and complex interfactional and internal factional power struggles. 40k is by its very nature often absurd to the extreme. Sometimes this can be somewhat detrimental to its own narrative, because when everything is supersized and extreme in the extreme, suddenly everything looks kind of the same, and then it becomes arguably less impressive. However, 40k just owns its own absurdity, and it's something that you just have to roll with and suspend your disbelief. For many who are obsessed with 40k, the hyper-violent, xenophobic, genocidal nature of its occupants is largely a source for much dark humour. Most people that are into Warhammer, they don't take it too seriously, but it is also fun to take things in 40k very seriously because it contains so much detail. But simultaneously, there are many memes and pure nonsensical comedy that comes from 40k because of just how extreme it is. The classic It Sounds Like Heresy being one such example, whereby anyone who dissents from the official line of thinking is declared a heretic and executed on the spot. It's one that I enjoy using all the time in the comments. And the key theme of 40k is purely about war. The lore is a vast, all-encompassing backdrop that stands on its own, but 40k for itself is all about the galactic wars that are unending. It's focused this way because it represents the background for a tabletop war game that is surprisingly about factional war. 40k itself operates on a fairly healthy...
but here's the thing, I don't know if I would count that as... I guess I'm using probably a very narrow definition of theme. I kind of think of theme... I think perhaps the better way to look at it is the message of the narrative. And to me, war itself is not a message. There are messages that can be told through war, but I haven't really felt like there have been any sort of overarching messages within 40k. And I think that might be my biggest problem with this universe and series, is just that they're and it's fine for stories to not have messages. I want to make that very fucking clear, because I know there'll probably be some people bitching in the comments about it. It's right there's stuff that you should just be able to watch and just have fucking fun with it, right? Like the Godzilla Kong movies. Those are fucking stupid movies to have fun in, right? And That's kind of how I also kind of view the Hobbit movies in comparison to Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit movies, while there are, if you want to look deeply into it, deeper messages such as greed, especially if you get the book, to talk about. But also, The Hobbit, in comparison to Lord of the Rings, is a lot lighter and can be just taken not as seriously. And now, of course, this is also attributed to Tolkien's skill as a writer, his skill of language and stuff like that, to be able to convey it in a way that is accessible for children and also for adults to delve deep into. But then Lord of the Rings is a lot darker, and has a lot more message, blatant and more purposeful messaging within it, and stuff like that. Whereas here in Warhammer 40k, perhaps the individual books them might have some messages from the authors of them, but I'm not feeling a overall sort of message, from Games Workshop, right? And that's fine. It's just, not my cup of tea.
Healthy dose of irony. Much of the events and organizations.
Okay, irony. The irony could be a message of the franchise, which, if that is the case, that's fine. But irony alone isn't enough for me. Irony, I feel like, is a lot like war, where it isn't on its own really a message, but it is something that can be utilized to greater enhance message, right? And obviously, for some people, that irony, could be enough. For me, it just isn't.
Forces in individuals often are the result of half-truths or pure indoctrination, and some of those that are held up as heroes are not what they appear to be, and as usual the context of events are very important, but many things can end up being actually quite subjective. The fact that the Imperium itself has, through its devout worship of the Emperor, now has its state religion embedded in almost everything it does, which is hilarious when you consider the Emperor of Man set out to eradicate religion from humanity entirely. Warhammer 40k draws from a lot of historical events and ideologies. It also borrows heavily from other settings like Dune, 2000 AD, Lovecraftian influence, obviously Tolkien, and even older texts like Milton's Paradise Lost and the Divine Comedy with Dante and the Inferno. 40k has continued to be fleshed out over time, and it shows no signs of abating. If anything, it's moving forward at a faster pace than ever. It is a universe that has consumed me for some 30 years, and I highly recommend that you allow the darkness of the far future to enter your life. You may live to regret it, but you will undoubtedly enjoy it. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, if you have a suggestion for what my next 40...
And that was What the Fuck is Warhammer 40k Explained, full beginner's guide plus every major faction lore / history by Lewitton. This was a good video. Ooh, I don't think I can properly compare this to Bricky's video. They both kind of do the same thing, but also not. They're both the same and also not. I think overall this might be actually the better intro than Bricky's video. Bricky's video did do a bit of a deeper dive. I think this one is a better kind of like just a little nibble into everything. It's a good like gateway into it. And then you watch Bricky's for kind of a better, more comedic sort of explanation. I think Bricky's way, I think the reason I'm having trouble kind of comparing the two is I do like Bricky's style of storytelling and conveying of information a lot. Like his style is one that is very engaging for me as an audience, as a part of the audience, as a consumer. But I think looking at it more perhaps objectively as to understanding the basics and the factions of this universe, I think this video is better. I think on a technical aspect, this video is better, not on a subjective aspect. as technical as a review can be. And as I've said before, reviews can't really be objective. Pretty much it's all subjective. It's just that there are certain things we humans tend to like in majority more so than other things, right? That's why there are tropes that exist and stuff like that, and bad things that are considered bad tropes and blah blah blah, because most people have view those in those certain ways and whatnot. But yeah, this was a good video. I should have watched this sooner. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.